Welcome to the podcast, Angela Foster. It is a pleasure to have you here. Even though we brushed shoulders back in 2019, it's lovely to speak to you in person. So thanks so much for coming on.
It's amazing to be here, Jodie. Thank you. And yeah, I can't believe what is that? That's nearly like 6 years ago. It's gone so quickly.
I know it has. And that was right before COVID. So all the world turned upside down after that.
It did. It did. Yeah, so true.
We've,
Just a
we've
little bit.
forgotten. Yeah. So, Angela, I always like to start with a bit of your personal journey. So, how you ended up in this space. And I know there is some law in there, which we'll discover, which is very exciting. But also just, what took you to come to this point to be able to really support people so well with their health, in health coaching, in nutrition, and really to have that amazing passion for yourself, maybe a personal story behind that.
Yeah, there's definitely a personal story. Do you know, I'm so passionate about helping women, and I think that we need it more than we have ever needed it in our lives and in history, really, right? I think that we are under unprecedented amounts of pressure to juggle everything and be everything to everyone. And I think that so many women want to enjoy their careers and have it all, but also stay healthy and be a great mom and all these different things. I think it's a really big juggling act. And it's interesting because when you and I met at the Health Optimisation Summit, that would have been September 2019, I believe.
That's
That
right.
was, yeah, I'd not long started my podcast and I was getting towards, I suppose, the end of the healing journey that I was on at that point. It was
Mm.
about a month or so after that I transitioned off all my medication. But as you were rightly saying, I was, originally a corporate lawyer in London working, all-nighters, weekends, crazy, crazy busy. And I had wanted to, I sort of moved out of London actually to a larger firm, moved
Mm.
house, moved out of the city, was looking at how can combine this career with a family, the family that I wanted to have. I didn't have a family at this point. And I had these sort of two goals. One was to get pregnant and have a baby, and the other was to make partner. And I was like, well, I guess I'd had a background of PCOS and endometriosis. So my gynecologist, I'd had to have some surgery and things. And that was really
Mm.
my first foray into health because I was realizing the connection between metabolism and female hormone health and how at its core PCOS is really a metabolic disorder.
Mm.
And we can always talk about that a bit further down if you want to. So that was my first foray, and I was really trying to pay more attention to my health. But I had these two goals of going for partner, thinking about having a family, and I thought, well, I'll just go for both and see which one comes in. And then I made partner when I was 8 months pregnant with my first child. Took the dutiful advice of my gynecologist to go back on the pill, which I don't think is really the best advice, and I'd been on it for many years, in between pregnancies to try and stem that endometriosis. Give it 6 months and let's see if you have another child. And I wasn't expecting it to happen as quickly as it did. So by the time I was due to go back on maternity leave, I was 3 months pregnant with my second child, having just
Wow.
become a partner and all the pressure of bringing in the business and things like this. So it was crazy. And I struggled with postpartum depression really, really quite badly with both of
Mm.
those pregnancies. And then with my third pregnancy, I thought I'd really sort of healed myself. I'd come off the meds and different things, had done a lot of kind of inner work and CBT. But then when
Mm.
I had my daughter, I had a really, really big crash. And that's when it highlighted, I think, actually, looking back now, a lot of the things that I've struggled with since teenage years in terms of cycling between anxiety, depression, and then these sort of extreme highs. And so when my daughter was 2 years old, it had got to the point where it was not untreatable, but it was becoming harder and harder to treat. And I was really struggling. And they were
Mm.
moving me across different medications, introducing antipsychotics to try and control for these bipolar episodes. And it was all a bit messy. And I'd really, at this point, created this prison in my own mind, where I just wanted to turn, I was desperate. I just wanted to turn thoughts off in my head. I just didn't have
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
And I think that, when you're in that place, and for anyone listening, it's a really difficult position to find yourself in. And yet I felt so responsible for these three young children.
Of
And
course.
just I couldn't see a way out. And the way out was what the end of my life. But I didn't want to leave them without a mum. I didn't want to leave my husband,
Yeah.
all of them being that that, partner or child of the person who effectively took their own life. So I was really struggling, and that's when it took a toll on my physical health. And I think I know you talk a lot about this mind-body connection and how we can't kind of separate the two. So it had an impact on my physical health. And then eventually I was hospitalized with double pneumonia. It was viral and bacterial, neutropenic. My white blood cell count was so low. And that was really the defining moment in my life when I had this strong realization, I'm going to have to do something about this.
Yeah, that really low point, that really brings us out of it. My goodness. Wow. So there's a lot there. That's a lot there, Angela.
There's a little bit to unpack,
yeah,
isn't it?
there's a lot.
Yeah.
So, and I know, and I really want to jump into the health optimization, performance optimization, and, what you've learned from that. But, I guess being in that position, and we all know lawyers, like you said, it's not easy work, and it really shows you the opposite of how we should be living. With my clients, I talk about all the ways and the laws of how we should live, and we really turn against those, and that's when we find ourselves completely out of balance. And as you refer to the mind body connection, we need to be connected constantly with ourselves, and we choose to ignore that. And I talk to a lot of people about this when the symptoms are screaming at you, and you're still not listening, and trying to help and support the body, but it's actually telling you what it needs. So, all right, let's pull apart a few things first. Let's go into women's health, and then obviously this is a huge passion of yours, and we'll also talk about the after children journey as well, which is something that I know you're very passionate about as well. But working through that, what did you find initially on how you could move into a better position in health? Like, what was sort of the defining moments of what got you to that next point, after that really low point in hospital with the infections? What brought you out first? What was the first things that you started to do?
So the first thing was connecting with something that was bigger than myself. So in the hospital, and I think this can be hard for people, right? Because you're looking for something, and often people say, Simon Sinek talks about finding your why and all these things. Sometimes people feel lost. For me, when my kids came to visit me and they left, and I was looking at photos, I reflected and I was like, these kids need a mum. And there was just this overwhelming sense of love, which I'm super grateful for that experience, because that has guided me. But each thing is just like, I think often we think, to achieve success, we need to have it all figured out in the beginning. For me, that was the start of my journey. So it was like, I'm going to do this for my family and for my kids. And so no matter how hard it got, I was doing it. There was a purpose bigger than myself. Over time, and we can talk about how I did that, but then over time, that translated into, wow, I'm not the only one here. So many women are struggling, maybe not to the same level that I was, but so many women are struggling in different areas with their hormones, with their mood, with their anxiety, with trying to have a high. I think, to be honest, if you are a woman, you are a high performer. That's just because you are, because of the things you're called to do. You have to be, right? You've got no choice. So we read so many books on high performance for men, and it's like, this is great. It's a choice for you. We have no choice.
Absolutely. No. It's like 24-hour a day performing, and it has to be at the highest level, otherwise something drops and then people suffer.
Yeah, and trying to stay in touch, as you say, with yourself and aligned as well. So then I realized this was something that actually it was bigger than me and my family, other people, other women needed help, and they were kind of identifying with my content. Then in 2019, I thought I want to learn more. I'd retrained by this point as a health coach, a personal trainer, a nutritionist, done all these qualifications. They were originally out of my curiosity. Started looking at genetics, did some courses in that. And I was understanding our genes aren't our destiny. And then I thought, well, if I launch a podcast, me with my naivety at the time, to be honest, just thought, I'll interview the best of the best in the world, and that's how I can learn. And fortunately, I'm super grateful for the guests that we've had on and that we continue to have on, who I learn from every single week. And that has just really opened my eyes to something. And I think just reignited that passion as this wider mission of how can I bring this information to women? I know that we don't have a lot of science in terms of the research on women, and that is definitely opening up now and catching up. But I think just hearing from doctors, scientists, specialists like yourselves, and, actually the real life implementation of how it works for us women, and the intersection of that mind, body, spiritual alignment, has been really, really powerful for me and for the people that I connect with. And so I'm now just still on that journey, loving it every day.
Yeah, and there's so much to learn, and it's constantly evolving, isn't it? And like you said, the research is good to a point, and there's more and more coming. I'm in the process of starting a PhD myself very soon. So, and women's health is something that I'm passionate about because the same reasons I've seen so many in my clinic suffering unnecessarily without the help that they need for so long. And then now there is help, and they just still don't know where to find it. And it's just trying to reach those masses of knowing that there's somewhere to go and somewhere to support. But it really does come to the point of knowing that individual person, like you say, on the ground running and being with clients and actually coaching them one-on-one, or being with them in a consultation office, and then actually seeing where their journey is, because we have to meet them where they're at. And some of the research doesn't always give us that information, doesn't always provide that for us. So we need to be supporting women through all of this, which is why I love so much what you do. So
Oh,
it's
thank you.
absolutely incredible. So what have you found, I guess, being the biggest influences on how you've supported women? I guess we can talk about biohacking, we can talk about, any detail you want, supplements, techniques. I know you've mentioned CBT already for yourself. There's all these different things and tools and tricks of the trade that we can be using. What have you found to be the most powerful, I'd say?
I would say that there's a range of things, but I think it's the intersection between understanding that spiritual side and kind of soul alignment, if you like, with
Mm,
your female physiology. And I know that most women that certainly I speak to, and I imagine a lot of your audience listening to, they recognize the they recognize that spiritual side to them, and they want to connect deeper, and they want to understand the interplay between being in their masculine energy and embracing that feminine flow as well, and how they can get that balance right. And when we then look at the science behind that and the data, we see that translate into improved heart rate variability. So it's a core part of our program, is looking at heart rate variability. And actually, when anyone comes into our program, we give them a medical grade device. So not just a wearable where it's capturing data overnight, but a
mhm,
medical grade device where we can take assessments over 3 days, over 5 days, periodically, to really understand what's going on in their lives and give them that outside, very objective piece as to how
mm.
they're handling their stress, because it's just the most non-invasive way to really understand what's going on with someone's nervous system, from an inflammatory perspective, from a stress perspective, mindset. And actually, when they see that data and then they can see in real time how they can change their physiology, it's super powerful.
Absolutely. And HIV is such an easy measure when it's done for you in these devices. Like I've got the Aura Ring, and just knowing the subtleties, and I track a lot of clients' Aura Ring data as well, that we have in the clinic, and you can just see little tweaks or small changes, or eating too late. Just subtle lifestyle shifts and changes can really reduce the resiliency of a woman, or even men as well. And just making and knowing that, then you can feel better and make small changes and then get better resilience over time, and then have less bad health outcomes. So it's an incredible insight that you can actually have. Like you say, it's that connecting the dots as well, and you can give those recommendations and personalized support for them. Yeah,
Yeah, very much so.
fabulous. So is there anything you find to be common trends in that, I guess, reducing or changing the HRV dramatically for women? What are some things that you see? It could even be hormones or time, or age for women.
So we definitely see like a drop in resiliency, and I think this is documented now a little bit in the literature around the second half of the menstrual cycle, and then also in perimenopause. And a lot of women will say, what the hell's happening to my HRV? It feels like it's tanking, in that perimenopausal transition. I would say what I see across both men and women in the data that we look at is most people, if they are redlining it all day,
Hmm.
unfortunately, they're redlining it at night. And I think that's where it becomes really powerful when they start to look and they see, oh my goodness, like there's just blocks and blocks. The interface that we use shows it very simply in terms of green and how green you are and how red you are.
Hmm.
And you know, how much that sympathetic drive is dominating things is when
Yeah.
people start to see, God, I'm actually in sympathetic drive for most of the night, and they don't
Mm,
understand why, and they wake up and they're like, with aura, for example, you could wake up and go, well, why is it one day I get really good data and then another day I don't? But when you actually see what's been happening during the day, and that there's no time, and that you haven't got, we often talk about metabolic flexibility, and that ability, you know, we know for longevity it's important for the human body to be able to transition effectively between burning fats and between burning carbs. But we don't think
mm,
about our physiology and think it's really important that our nervous system is dynamic in nature, and that we can switch between that sympathetic engagement, which isn't wrong, we want some of that, but also to get back into that parasympathetic state. And so once we help them transition during the daytime and they see that in the data, we start to see that reflected at night. And now they're sleeping a lot better, but most importantly, they're getting more recovery at night, which makes a big difference to how they feel.
yeah, absolutely. And so many other areas. So I guess, sleep support, in touching on that, what are the biggest, I guess, changes do you make, or suggestions do you make for your clients? Is there anything that you say a lot of?
In terms of sleep or in terms of that daytime optimization?
Changing, yeah. So changing the sleep optimization. Obviously, you notice that they're in these variances and domination of nervous system. Is there anything that you give in terms of suggestions for that, particularly that you find so effective?
Yes. So I think I'm a big believer that, you know, if we can get 1% better and micro changes move the needle over the long term much more. And so micro recoveries are extremely powerful in this regard, even if just because people often think, you know, I don't have time to meditate, or I don't have time to just do breath work, or I'm so stressed. And I think it's about understanding what works with your physiology. Because for some people, absolutely, like you need to go and burn off that stress. Just go out for a walk outside, you're getting access to natural light. The movement is kind of flushing things through, and we'll see them then move into the green. And then that starts to be mirrored at night a little bit more. So we're working with it. For other people, I mean, in an ideal world, people would introduce micro recoveries of all of these, right? They would do a very short bit of breathing, and it doesn't have to be long. Again, it can be 60 seconds of just down regulating your nervous system, you know, or even 2 to 3 minutes where you're dropping it into around 4 to 6 breaths a minute. That feels
Mm,
very, very different. You know, getting up, putting some music on is a great way to change your physiology. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Getting
yeah,
up close and intimate with your partner has a big impact on HRV that I think is really underestimated, you know. And then we know that you know, if particularly someone we're in love with, we release lots of oxytocin, things like that. They're very simple things that when we're stressed, we forget about. And we think,
yeah.
oh, I don't have time for this. Do you know what I mean? But they make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And they seem so simple, and they seem like things that we should be doing. But then, as you say, when we're stressed, it gets all overwhelming, and all you want to do is sort of shut down, recluse
Yeah.
yourself away from the world, and just hide. And that's the opposite of what we should be doing.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
It's true. And I
yeah,
think with women, we know that we're actually designed to seek out. Men kind of go inwards, but women are designed to seek out and be with their female friends and things like that, and talk about experiences and make it shared. And that, again, just really down regulates your nervous system, you know, and just helps you move into more of that parasympathetic drive. I think also people forget with workouts, right? Those are a stress. So if you work out and you do something intense in the morning and then you run to your next activity, do you know what I mean?
mm,
You're running on to get your train on your commute or something, or to come home and get the kids ready for school, and then you're like rushing to work and all these things. If I do this, like ticking off that to-do list, that makes a big difference. Whereas if you finish your workout and just finish it 2 minutes earlier and go and lie in Shavasana for 2 minutes and just breathe,
yeah.
it's so peaceful. Do you know what I mean? And now you've just again introduced that dynamic ability between switching states, but you haven't added lots of extra time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even more important when we're changing and when we're talking about women and we're shifting into different hormonal patterns like perimenopause, coming out of childbearing years into perimenopause shifts and changes, that it's even more important that we're looking after those demands and that shift in nervous system regulation, like you say, because then we're more likely to have, and it's tricky, isn't it? For a lot of women, it's then looking after their elderly parents at the time that they're shifting through perimenopause. Sometimes they're having kids who are going through and they're teenagers, and then it's more of a almost strained time and highly stressful time because you're caring for more people. You think, younger years are the harder years, but sometimes that shifts for a lot of people into the caring state for other areas of the family. So, and that can exacerbate all these symptoms that women are experiencing, and they just completely suffer and become, so symptomatic that it feels overwhelming and hopeless. So, when you're
And I
looking,
think, Jodie,
yeah,
like we're part of
yeah,
that sandwich generation as well, right? Because we've got elderly parents who, unfortunately, for many of us, they're living longer, but they're not living with good health. And that's what the data shows, right? Is we have this sort of 15, up to 15-year span of
yeah,
ill health. And so women are then often tasked with the caring. So they're carrying this massive invisible load and emotional load of, what do the children need? What happened at school today? What club are they going on? What trip? All this stuff. And then looking after the parents and really not finding enough time for themselves.
yeah.
I think it's a difficult situation.
It is, isn't it? And then they come to you or I and say, why can't I think straight? Why is my memory declining? Am I getting Alzheimer's? What's happening?
Yes.
And it's like, well, no, there's just too much going on. You
There's
just
too
can't
many
cope
things
right
stuffed
now.
in. Yeah,
How much do you think we have? Like, how much room do you think we have in here?
exactly.
Like, it's just it's too much. So, I guess we all know, and I feel like there's a great awareness, and more, people like yourself are coming out and supporting perimenopause and actually giving the awareness for the information. So I think that's like first step, and then having the support there for women. So, like, I guess, we've talked about a few methods and tricks. Is there anything else that you go towards? And I know that you use a lot of technology yourself, and I know biohacking has been a big part of your life and what you talk about. Is there anything that you feel like there is like overhyped technology and anything that's underrated or not utilized enough? And I like to always ask this because it's, all the shiny things are nice for all of us, but sometimes they're just not necessary, and sometimes they are.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? So what do I think? Yeah, I think some of these are very, very personal, right? I think there's been a massive trend in everyone to rush out and buy a cold plunge. And
Yeah.
then, when as she posted the other day, here's the benefits of cold plunging. And it was quite interesting to seeing all people's responses.
Mm.
I'm not a massive fan of cold plunging. I think there are benefits, but I would say
Yeah.
this is one where I think it's a little bit overrated. I think
Yeah.
there are some, and there are many, in fact, that I put on there.
Mm.
But if you think about it, sauna beats it so far in terms of the science that we have every time. And many people prefer the heat, and particularly women. I can't tell you how many women message me just after posting that going, but I have Raynaud's, Angela. And what do I do about this? And I think actually moving between hot and cold can help with things like Raynaud's. I think people underestimate the fact that stress is also paying part in that constriction and in
Yeah.
Raynaud's. And actually, if we can deal with your stress and maybe adding more stress to the equation, like pushing yourself into a cold plunge isn't the answer. So I think there are some things that, they just become massive Instagram trends. And maybe the science isn't as powerfully there as we might think. Not to say that it doesn't lower inflammation and it doesn't help with dopamine and all these things. I think it does, and I think it can be really powerful. But I think
Mm.
that there's a lot of pressure on people to go, oh my God, right, I've got to go wake up at 5 a.m. I've got to work out, I've got to meditate for 30 minutes and then do another transcendental one at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Do you know what I mean? I've got to cold plunge or at least turn the shower to cold, even though I really don't feel like it at all. And then I've got to come down and I've got to make some kind of power smoothie while I'm trying to do 3 different breakfasts for my kids. I think
Mhm.
that, I
Mhm.
think we have to just accept that, let's
Yeah.
do the ones that we can. And I think probably what is most underrated is the power of movement, which is completely free and
Mm.
changes people's blood work, I think, faster than anything else if it's coupled with good nutrition. I think it's really, really amazing how we can do that. And, even myself, for example, I mean, I have terrible genetics, if I'm honest, when I've looked at them. And that shows, I think my mom and dad kind of gave me the worst of everything, really. Um, so I've been looking at different biomarkers, trying to get them down. And, you look at things like when you look at cholesterol panels and you look at ApoB and also LP little a. And, some of these, like LP little a, that what the science is showing is that's mostly genetically determined. And yet what I'm
Mhm.
seeing in my data is that the more I have been compliant with really good quality nutrition and movement,
Yeah.
it's actually moving those numbers, even though it's not supposed to. And I think that would be the one that I think we vastly underestimate.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I want to actually dive into that. It's a really good segue. But first, I think you're right. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on, and then there's more things that we need to remember. For men and women, we don't need to be loading up our schedules more when we're thinking that we're trying to become healthier by having too much to remember and to add in. All is good and well on the research and individually, but it's what's necessary at that time. And I think if you can find a tracking system, or again, data like you do, to know what's suitable for you when, and then using those for those times, and then making sure, firstly, though, the basics are there, like the foundational nutrition, the foundational movement, and then if that, and the water, love, connection, dancing, joy, if all of those basics are not there, then what are we even doing mucking around with the fancy shiny things? Like, we need to be actually working on the groundwork. Yeah. So
Yeah,
really,
exactly. And
really love
I
all
mean, if
that.
you look, if you look at something like teeth, you're doing really well if you're brushing your teeth twice a day and you're
Yeah.
flossing. But the
Yeah.
fact that you don't oil pull for 15 to 20 minutes and then scrape your tongue because you're rushing to make the kids breakfast is going to
Yeah.
be okay. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, let's
Yeah.
not add extra pressure because
Yeah. Absolutely.
your
I was at a
biohacking
conference.
morning routine is like, it's just going to become so long if we do
Yeah.
this.
Absolutely. There's another one to add to that, is that now you can't brush your teeth too early. And Kieran Christian is a good friend of mine, and we had a conference with him a couple of years ago, and I remember learning about the nitric oxide. And if you brush your teeth too early in the morning, then you're actually stopping the nitric oxide ability of the bacteria to produce. So it's again like, well, not too soon, not too late, not too much, not too little.
And maybe then I'll just like do this whole like session in front of my red light because then I'll be getting it, but then set an alarm so I turn around at the right time. Like it just becomes unmanageable, doesn't it? Like,
I think it was all like in the peak of when we were together in London, 2019. It was like a rise in all this biohacking excitement, and everyone was crazy about it, and all these new things, and it really felt like there was starting to, well, peaking but coming into everyone's lives as sort of like normal technology. But then I think obviously fads come in and out. But then now it's like, well, let's focus on what actually is important. And I think COVID brought that back for us, as that connection and what's those foundations. So because, in COVID, we couldn't go out and move. We were limited to a small amount of time. I know we were here for an hour. It's only exercise time. So for women particularly, I think it would be nice to dive into this. What have you noticed around exercise, movement, and what's the easiest ways to look at it for women, and in maybe even different stages of their cycle, and then hormonal life cycle as well?
yeah, such a good question. And
Mm,
there's a lot there. I think, firstly, I would say that whether you're a cycling woman or whether you are in peri or post menopause, you want to embrace two things throughout your kind of fitness journey, if you like. And I think it's really a fitness lifestyle because it's not a once said and done. You don't get fit and then you can forget about it because
yeah.
we're always fighting aging, right? So it's the law of entropy. Everything is going to go to chaos and disorder if we don't look after it. So it's kind of like
Yeah. Yeah.
maintaining and servicing your car, right? It needs to get done.
Absolutely.
And there's probably two things. There are two key pillars. One is we need to look after your cardiorespiratory health. And then the
Mm,
other thing is we need to look after your muscle mass, which interrelated to that is your bone density, right? Because
mm,
your bones will benefit from the work that you do with your muscles. And so then when we look at the stats on this, if someone's not training their cardiorespiratory fitness, they're going to decline their VO2 max, which is a measure of their kind of oxygen capacity,
mm,
by about 10% or so every decade. So that's a really important number. We know that
yeah.
if you don't train your muscles and use resistance work, you're going to lose muscle mass around 3 to 8% a decade. And that's
Mm,
muscle size, but you're also going to lose strength. And the science that I see, I can't remember the exact figures, it seems to be a little bit faster in terms of strength. So if we're looking ahead, and we want to be able to, I don't think anyone wants to be on a perpetual diet. I think being 80, 90% compliant with your nutrition is just fine, right? If you want to go out and have dessert, have dessert. Like, I don't think it's a big
yeah.
deal.
Still need the
Um,
joy.
yeah, exactly. That's part of the joy. And so, if you've looked after your muscle mass, then
Mm,
your metabolism is going to be operating a lot better and you're going to have more freedom and flexibility. So, I'd say that looking at those two pillars and making sure that you're dialing those in, then we
mm,
put the other stuff around it, like the Pilates, if you love it, the yoga, things that work balance the smaller muscles, they're all really important. You know, Kegels for your pelvic floor, all of those things are really, really important. But fundamentally, we do need to get the two big pillars dialed in terms of some kind of training program. And then you look at it across 12 months of like, how can I periodize this? Because if it's a little bit, we were just talking there, what could your dental routine look like and
Yeah,
how
yeah,
lost you could get in it? What would it be
absolutely.
a minefield with your fitness if I said to you, right, you need to do high intensity interval training, plus you need to do some sprint interval training, plus you need to do balance work, plus, you know, single leg work, you need to do some rebounding, you need to do some resistance training, you do strength, you need to do hypertrophy, you need to do power, you need to do
Yeah.
zone 2, you need to do zone 4, zone 5. And by the way, let's not forget the middle range because we need to do some of that as well. And when you want to down regulate, go do zone 1 and you're like, oh my God, like what does that mean even? It's so
I'm
much.
impressed how fast you said that. That was very impressive.
It's just we're
Yeah.
getting into the crazy
Wow.
again, aren't we? So it's like
Absolutely.
looking across it and going, across a year, how could I fit these things in and still have fun? Play a sport, it's good for your brain as well, if you can.
Yeah.
And what do I love to do? And then break it down from there and look at, I always
Mm,
think, let's look at the minimum effective dose. If you're an untrained individual, you're going to see results in that 12 months, that first 12 months, so much faster. If you're
yeah.
highly trained, it's going to be a lot more difficult to inch your way up, if you like.
Mm,
But you want to continue to do that. And so I think working with somebody who can help you really understand the mechanics of a program and how that
yeah.
works
Yeah.
is going to be really like a worthwhile investment, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that helps is that, and that I guess at the end of the day, coaches, practitioners, trainers help you clarify, simplify, and support you to be more motivated and keep you on track. And then it takes the complexity out of it because then you're seeking out individuals that have made it their expertise and then they know more and also can guide you for what you don't need to know more than anything.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so
Oh,
true.
yeah. So I think you're right. Like exercise is incredible, and outcomes, like you say, from blood work, from data points and results for anyone that we see, it is the most incredible changes that you can have. But it's I find for some of the population, it is a really tricky one to start, and it can be 6 months down the track that you're still just trying to get your client out for a walk. Or still just trying to get someone to just move their body in a way that they enjoy, because it can be one of those things that are, they're stopped because of personal issues or having something that's sore or, so you're working with these things individually. So it can be really tricky. Yeah.
Mm. It can be. And I think that the more we, chunk it right down, as you're saying there, to even just getting out for a walk, first of all, make
Yeah.
it really, really small and do something that rewards you. Because if we can release certain neurotransmitters in response to what you're doing, if you go out for a sunshine walk, you're going to have a release of dopamine and you're probably going to get some serotonin as well. That's really, really helpful.
Mm,
If you go a bit more upbeat and you increase the pace and you're doing it in the midday, in the middle of the day, for example, you'll have some endorphins and stuff. Like the more that we can like feed that reward process back, the more
yeah.
likely you are to go and repeat the behavior. Whereas if it's really uncomfortable and it hurts and you're hating every single minute of it with a trainer shouting at you, and then you've got DOMs for 3 days afterwards, you're probably not going to go back in a hurry.
You won't feel very good.
No.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. So fabulous. And I think that that's wonderful. I wanted to sort of move on to, I guess they might be a bit more of a quick fire questions, but it's maybe just stepping a little bit outside the box and just seeing maybe, so as coaches, practitioners, as people who are guiding other people, we experiment a lot. And I always like to hear about what your sort of like best successes are for experimentation and maybe your most epic failures are for some of experimentations. And it might not be that you have a failure, but something that you tried and maybe didn't like or had a bad result from. So it could be anything in that realm. It could be a product, it could be a technology, it could have been something like that.
Okay, so we start with, I'll tell you, we can start with the one I'm most surprised by, if you
Okay.
like.
Yeah.
And maybe actually that links also to the biggest, I would say, not, it might not be a failure, but something that I would say is still very much a work in progress for me.
Okay.
So the two interrelate, if you like. So I
Yeah.
would say
Yeah.
the biggest surprise to me was removing alcohol from my life and how much personal development I would experience as a result of that. That was a
Mm,
really massive surprise. I thought, and I'd done it quite a few times before, where I'd given up for 30 days, for example, and then I'd gone back to it. And so I initially started this challenge of giving up for 90 days because I'd
mm,
seen, the literature around the fact that it takes about 66 days to break a habit and create a new one. So I
yeah.
thought, well, if I go well beyond that, um, how would that feel? When would I stop getting reminders? And it was something that was like a final piece. So I think I mentioned earlier in our conversation that I came off. I was on very strong antidepressant and antipsychotic medication, and it was the back end of 2019 that I came off that. During the phase of me healing myself, I wasn't an alcoholic, but alcohol was quite a big part of my life because it was something I utilized to help me sleep. Because anyone who struggled with depression, one of the things they really report is lack of sleep. And so
Mm,
it was sort of a bit of a crutch, but I also had this romantic relationship with it where my husband and I invested in wine. We would lay it down. We visited vineyards. It was a shared thing that we had. So it was
yeah.
very sort of muddy in terms of that relationship. And when I was at my worst, I was, starting the day with caffeine and antidepressants and winding down with wine and antipsychotics. That's not a pretty place to be
Yeah.
in. And so it was like the last thing on my list of could I embrace an alcohol free lifestyle and what would happen?
Mm,
How long would it take?
yeah.
And that was a really interesting experiment to me because after I did 90 days, I kind of stopped getting reminders actually that it was a good thing to have a glass of wine and wind down around to the day 55, I would say. So it was a little bit earlier than the research. And then when I got to 90 days, I was like, oh, I'm so close to 100. Why don't I go for 100 days? So we did that. And my husband was doing it with me at this time. So
Mm,
we'd done 3 months. We were like, let's do 6 months. Let's just try it. So we did 6 months, and that seemed quite easy. And then we were due to break it on Christmas Day because we'd
mm,
stopped drinking on the 25th of June. But we
yeah.
had this like customary thing where every Christmas we would have a glass of champagne as the children opened their Christmas Eve boxes. But it was the
Yeah.
last day of our no alcohol thing. So we didn't want to break it. So we didn't break it. So then on Christmas Day, I remember my husband sort of looking at me and going, well, we didn't break it last night. Maybe we just don't break it. Should we do another 6 months? Which seemed very unlikely coming from him. So I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, why not? Let's just do another 6 months. And that
Yeah.
was actually quite a bit harder. Anyway, I got to a year and I experienced so much personal growth. I could no longer look outside of myself.
Mm,
um, I had to, it was really just me. There was nothing to distract me, nothing to say, I've had a really stressful day or this has happened. I'll just have a glass of wine. And that was my shut off point. And I realized then actually that driven lawyer in me, I was a bit of a workaholic and that a glass of wine was a really good way to transition and a segue. So I had to kind of address many of these issues. And I think I had some more kind of, I don't want to say enlightenment, but more spiritual kind of, I guess, and more alignment with my values and things like that as I went through this process. So
mm,
when I had that year streak, my husband had done the year, he was ready to have the odd drink. I didn't feel that I could trust myself. I'd gotten control of my mood in a
yeah.
way that I'd never had control of before. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that for someone who has struggled with mental health, that I'm ever
Mhm.
really at that place where I feel like, yeah, I've mastered it. And that's where this failure point would come in. But I'm as close as I've ever been. And so I just extended out the window. So I was like, okay, I'll do 1,000 days, which
Mm.
actually is a week away now. So
Wow.
yeah, it went, it's been a while. And that was an experiment that has paid off in a way that has surprised me. Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and is still paying dividends. And I wasn't expecting that. I knew all the things like, you are going to have more vitality. And
Mm,
honestly, yeah, it feels
mm.
great at 5 a.m. every day. There's no
Yeah.
hangover.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And there's no drag from the weekend hangover either. You know that
Yeah.
one that you would have.
Yeah.
So um
Absolutely.
like that feels pretty amazing. So but I was surprised by the personal developments. That would be the biggest surprise for me.
Yeah. I guess we're faced, alcohol is such a what's the word for it? It's a cover up. It's a band-aid for a lot of our
Hmm.
stresses. And like you say, it would be that switch into a different role, maybe from work to home and to be able to wind down quickly. But then as soon as we have that coping strategy taken away from us, then everything comes out. And like you say, you didn't, sort of trust yourself. You knew what was to come. And sometimes this creates instability when you're having these sorts of compounds, or alcohol is such a social thing as well. So it's really hard to the willpower involved in that. You have to be able to be very strong within yourself too, especially when there's so much social, so socially acceptable, and it's how people actually communicate most of the time with each other. open up and
Yes, true.
start to actually say things. Yeah. Oh,
True,
that's
true.
incredible. So a 1,000 day anniversary coming up. That's absolutely amazing. Well done, Angela. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So is there anything, now we're coming to the end and I want to mention everything we need to for you, but is there anything else that you feel like you can't live without at the moment that maybe you recommend to clients often, or it might be a strategy or a technique or a tool or a technology or something at the moment that you can't live without? And we know alcohol, you can live without that one, but
Yeah.
anything
Um,
else you can't live without?
Well, I mean, it's interesting actually because we didn't, when we were talking about the exercise, so we didn't touch on the
Mm,
female health piece. And I think
yes,
that
let's come back to that.
probably the bit that I mean, I could live without it because I think I've become more intuitive, but I do find the data, like you were talking about Aura, the data from apps like Aura, Ultra Human, Whoop, extremely powerful because I think that it gives us that objective look at, and I don't think the algorithms are quite there. But if you
No.
just take the numbers and look, was my resting pulse higher last night? Maybe I
Yeah,
ate too late. Did my
yeah.
HRV drop enough, or like did it drop too low? And
Mm,
was it very low at the beginning? If you go into the desktop application of Aura, which I'll often do with my clients, is actually you can see that they've pushed too hard during the day and their
mm,
HRV is really flatlining until about 2, 3 a.m. So there's not enough time to have that bounce back. I think
yeah.
that data is really powerful. And then we can understand how is what we're doing working with your female physiology if you're a cycling woman, if you're
Mm,
perimenopause, or like, have we got that
yeah.
friction point right between how much we are pushing and stressing your nervous system and how much we are introducing recovery practices, because we can only really ever coach you up to your level of recovery. Is your
Mm,
breathing too fast? People often don't look at their respiratory rate at night, but if your breathing rate is higher, that also indicates a degree of stress. Is your body
mhm,
temperature rising? I think there's just so many things that are not based around the algorithms that they've put on there, which aren't really designed for women. But if you're just kind
mm,
of looking at the raw data, you can pick up a lot from it. And you can, people like me who are type A personalities and just want to just keep going regardless and then have a habit of burning out, actually, we can use that data to prevent and protect against that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So just slightly touching on that, is there anything else specific that you guide women across in terms of cyclical exercise? Because I know this is a really important one and we don't talk about it enough, because there is this circadian rhythm of the male biology that has dictated a lot of what we are doing in the exercise realm. And I know for myself I guide women, but what specifically do you look at? Is there any like tips or tricks that you guide women on?
Yeah, so I do like women who are still having a menstrual cycle that's pretty
Mm,
regular. I think
mm,
understanding that menstrual cycle and just understanding your data and whether you are recovering is really, really important. And just being kind to yourself. So if at the end of the month, you're strong at any point in the month, it's just going to feel easier when estrogen is rising in that early part and you've got more resiliency, through to ovulation. Some women at ovulation actually don't feel great, but many women do, and they're glowing and, their skin looks amazing. And to be honest, there's about 4 days, isn't there, every month where you could just say, can I just be here? Just,
only,
just leave me
yeah.
here all the time. I'm
Yeah, yeah,
just going to schedule all my
absolutely.
events, all my podcast interviews, everything just for that one time. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Because I feel great. And it's like, then if you don't feel as good in the late
Mm,
luteal phase, things like magnesium can help with like puffiness and things and just like helping you feel more relaxed, if you like. Progesterone is very interesting because it's quite calming on the brain in terms of GABA, but then it does seem to affect our physiology and depress HRV
mhm,
a bit. But then is that a true picture? Is it the effects of progesterone or are you actually under recovered? And so just
mhm,
really starting to understand how strong you are and how you feel and how much more recovery you might need. That's so individual. And I don't
yeah.
think we can say, oh, I think sometimes we see people saying, oh, do this in week 1 and this in week 2 and this. I think that might be an oversimplification. I would say we're all very individual. I think in
Yeah.
perimenopause, I mean, that's just a whirlwind, isn't it? I'm right in the middle of that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy things are happening all the time.
But you
uh,
don't know where you're going to be on any
you don't know
given day.
where you're going to be. You just
Yeah.
ride with the waves and know that you do need more recovery. And you, most of all, you need kindness
Yeah.
to yourself. Because I think, even from a mental health perspective, we see increases. Women are most likely to commit suicide, I think, between the age of 45 and 55. That's a reality. And we see a lot of things from trauma, from early childhood, kind of rearing in and coming up for people in perimenopause. So I think being kind to yourself is really important, and just
Mm,
working with your body and what it can do, and understanding that at this point, we do really need, if we haven't already, to be looking after connective tissue and collagen structures within the body, looking after bone density,
yeah.
lifting a bit heavier, but then working with someone and building up to that. So I
Mm.
think, a whole new set of things become important at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with all of that. And to the cycling women, I think, yes, you're right. Again, we don't have to be thinking about too many things at different points. It's just knowing your body, and each individual month can be different as well. And very true about what you say about the HRV dropping in the second half of the month. And that's a trend that everyone can notice. And if you know that, then you're matching that. What would I normally do if I have lower HRV? Then I nourish my body, I soothe my body, I take the pressure off, I do more relaxation, I make sure I'm sleeping well. So I'm naturally looking after, and that's what the body needs at that time of the month as well. So really,
Mm.
really important insights, and great. So can't live without data, and making sure that we're aware of what is going on for ourselves is so important. So
And I think you
thank
can still
yeah,
lift weights and stuff, right? But maybe you're doing less
yeah.
high intensity. We know, like, when you do any kind of exercise, you release what's known as hope molecules, right? Which help you feel, it boosts your mood and things like that, which is just really lovely. So you want to carry on doing that. You're just maybe not doing everything with the same intensity that you might be where you better recovered.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good clarification. So thank you so much for all of that insight, Angela. It's just
My pleasure.
incredible, and your expertise and knowledge that you've built up over these years, and for the person that you have become because of the things that you've been through. I feel it always brings the best healers and best coaches and best practitioners out. So the journey that you have, we thank you. And it's
Thank you,
never easy to
Jodie.
go through that. Yeah. So Angela, where can people find you? I know you've got an incredible podcast, as we've mentioned already, and you also are working with another program now for perimenopause. I'm quite aware. So maybe give all the links and everything where people are best to find you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Jodie, and thanks for having me on. So, my podcast is High Performance Health. That's available on all platforms. And then I'm most active on my Instagram, which is Angela S. Foster. And that's where I share, bits of science every few days to help people, and just like tips and tricks and biohacks and things like that. That's the best place, probably those two places, to keep up with all my content. We run a program called Biosyncing, which is about putting all of this into practice in terms
Mm,
of syncing with your female physiology, syncing with your mindset and your values and everything. That's really a high performance program. But we are also bringing out a longevity for fitness program for women, and a perimenopause one. So I guess Instagram is probably the best place to stay in touch with all of those, or my newsletter.
excellent.
So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Busy lady, but lucky you've got the lawyer in you, so you can be highly charged all the time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Angela. And I hope I get to talk to you soon, maybe be over your way of the world at some point. And yeah, thank you so much for being on again.
Amazing. Thank you, Jodie. Thanks for having me.
No problem.